So I spent a lot of the day kind of preparing a video on AI and my thoughts on AI and why I don't even like talking about it. But it felt kind of wrong. It felt a little opportunistic. I suggest you watch Curtis King or Absa F. and Lutley's videos about it and the whole thing with Lupe Fiasco. It's pretty interesting. So instead, I'll just kind of give you my brief one-sentence version. And maybe, if there's enough interest, I will eventually release my full AI video. But the problem with AI is income inequality. Now, that's the actual problem because it's a technology that promises democratization, but ultimately just leads to the consolidation of wealth, which is also what we're talking about today, because I'm going to be talking about the opposite of AI. I'm going to be talking about physical media, about tapes and CDs, and what it was like to be consuming music in the height of the American Empire in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. Okay? That's what this is going to be about. And I'm designing this for two different publics. One, the young people, and by that I mean anybody who was not alive or who does not remember what it was like to be a consumer of music before, say, I don't know, October-ish 2001. And it's also for people who do remember to think about these times. I want to be very careful. I'm not going to be sitting here talking about how it was better. It's just different. It's just nostalgia. There were a lot of bad things about it. It's very American-centric. My wife grew up in Yugoslavia, and she does not remember the 90s as fondly as I do, quite obviously, if you know your history. So it's not just going to be like me saying like, then we rent a movie from Blockbuster and get a pizza at Pizza Hut and go back. I am just trying to describe it as it is because I've had a few people ask me and I thought, well, why not? Why not share what it was actually like? Because it might be interesting to you how different it was. And what's interesting is someday you may find yourself making a video like this for young people describing how Old Town Road was this really fun thing and discovering TikTok music, well, that was the way it should be because that will eventually be replaced as well. There is kind of a larger theme here, which I'm trying to get at, that music consumption has been much more democratized. You are able to listen to anything at all times, yet even though we have that democratization, we actually have a further consolidation of wealth. So it might actually tie into the AI video quite well, but I'll do that some other time. Now, the real reason I'm doing this video is, so if you're I'm not like a big YouTuber or whatever, but reasonable size. I'm quite happy with that. And like when you're on Instagram, you get your messages and that's cool. And then there's your hidden messages, your requested messages. And, those are like from people. And then there's like the third layer, which is hidden messages. Now, I don't know why they're hidden. I've gotten plenty of nice messages from there. I've gotten some wild got some wild messages, which I won't really go into. But I don't read every message. Most messages that I get are like, "Hey, would you please review my album?" And I would love to have the time to review everybody's album. I just don't. And so I apologize if you've ever sent me a message and I gave you crickets. I apologize for that. But someone just sort of suggested this theme about like what was it like buying hip hop in the 90s. So thank you to Michael J for this super duper hidden request on Instagram. So what am I going to be talking about? Really, I'm going to be talking about the time where I was a teenager. So we're talking 1990 to 2000. Right, because I turned 13 in 1990, I turned 23 in 2000, so kind of like that general time. I'm not sure my math worked out, but I was born in 77, so you just figure that out. I was lucky in some ways and unlucky in other ways. So my parents were not. That scene in Arrested Development, here's some money, go buy a Star Wars? That's kind of how my parents were with me and my brothers. So they weren't really heavy on guidance, but sometimes they would give us money to just kind of fuck off. And so that did mean that sometimes I could, go into Harvard Square, because I grew up outside of Boston. I could go into Harvard Square, or I could go into Newbury Street in Boston. And I didn't buy clothes. I didn't buy shoes. I only bought fast food. I only ate Taco Bell and burgers and stuff like that. So the only thing I cared about, I didn't drink. The only thing I cared about buying was music. So I didn't have unlimited funds, but I had enough that it was, 4 or 5 times a year, I would be able to, especially after Christmas, I'd be able to go in and like have a good time buying music. Eventually, I'd get a job at Blockbuster Video. True. My employee number was 290037229. Feel free to dox me with that. I don't know where that number lives. Don't dox me, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know what that number does anymore, but that was my employee number. My initial, just to give you some baseline money numbers here. The minimum wage was $4.25. So when I started working, I made $4.25. Within a month, I was promoted to assistant manager. I made $6.50. I had a friend who started at Starbucks at the same time, started making $7.25. Was I bitter? Yes. Did he bring back scones? Yes. Did it all even out? Absolutely. So, that's basically where I was. I had some, not really an allowance, but every once in a while I'd have some money to buy music, and I had a job where I could buy stuff. So let's talk about what are the things, because I've shown my CD collection before, and I kind of reference it, and I'll show it. Here's just a part of the D section of my music. I have thousands of CDs, right, that I've purchased over the years, a lot recently because they're so inexpensive now. So I want to talk about what did I buy, how did I decide to buy it, and how did I listen to it. I will also touch briefly on concerts. Some other time I will do a full Professor Skye talks about all the great concerts he's seen in his life, because I have seen some really cool concerts. Most of my ticket stubs are still in the possession of my ex-wife. And I'm a little bitter about that. I'm hoping to get those back. I think I just need to say that's gone, but we'll see. It's just a little airborne. It's still good. And maybe some other day I'll talk about merch as well in music. So, what did I buy? What was the physical media that I bought? Well, these days, when you talk about buying physical media, everyone buys vinyl. Everyone buys records. Do you know what you didn't do in the 90s? You did not buy records. Nobody had a record. I did not know a single person who had a record player. Okay, growing up in suburban Boston, in the 90s, I did not know a single person with a record player. My parents had a record player to play their old Frank Zappa albums, but that was it. So I can show you the first vinyl I ever bought. Okay, the first vinyl I ever bought was Life Story by Black Rob. I think that was in 2000. I went to a place called Biscuit Head Records in Mass. Was it on Mass Ave? I think it was on Mass Ave in Boston. I'll be talking more about that location soon. And it was like this real hardcore hip-hop place. And I bought this, and then I wanted to be cooler than I was, so I asked the guy what to buy, and he had me buy this DJ Charlie Chase Live at Harlem World in 1981 album. So those are my first vinyl purchases. But, that only came in at the very end. As I started to listen to some more vinyl, I had a friend who was a audiophile guy. He was super into that stuff. He worked for a company that would work in really high-end, like TVs and stuff. He would sell flat screen TVs for like $10,000. Because back in the day, that's what it cost. The TV that costs $150 now cost $10,000 then. He would talk about like gangsters who would show up to his place with just duffel bags filled with cash to put like little TVs in the headrests of their cars. So anyways, he was an audiophile. He taught me to love vinyl. But no, if I'm talking about the 90s, we're not talking about records. So just get that all the way out. Like if you have some kind of nostalgic feeling about like what was it like, it wasn't even really about tapes. Now tapes are interesting because like I had tons of tapes, but tapes never felt like a collection. It never felt like the thing that you held on to and prized. They had one super important function, which was they were able to be played in the car. I don't think I knew a single person my entire high school year who had a CD player in the car. Such a thing would be ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous. So that's why I've actually had to go back and re-buy a lot of the classic rap CDs, rap albums that I used to have, because I would mostly buy my rap stuff on tape so I could listen to it in the car. The Valley of the Jeep beats, the Terminator X album. I remember that very specifically. I remember Judgment Night, that soundtrack. I remember De La Soul, Onyx, all that. That's one thing. But tapes are also great because they're very portable. So this is a Yaz tape that I stole from my brother. Someone told me once that every kid in the 90s had an older brother who had Yaz upstairs at Eric's. I think that's true. I also borrowed this from my brother as well, my Cool Mo D. But the main thing that it did was it allowed you to dupe. It allowed you to copy. So most people in the 90s had a CD, if you were, in the suburbs and you had, your family had enough money that you didn't have to worry about food, you usually had a CD player and a tape player. That was pretty typical, the American suburbs in the 90s, right? And if you had a CD player and a tape player, that meant you could tape CDs. And that was the only way to copy music. Or you'd have a double deck tape player and you'd copy from one to the other. So that was really useful because then if you bought a tape, then someone else, if someone bought a CD, then you could have that tape. It just meant that you'd listen to it in your car. So, this is the soundtrack to Lone Star and Cable Guy, two really great movies. I actually put my ticket stubs from the movie on the cassette tapes. There's a sort of hierarchy of tapes. You had your Maxell XL2s. That was your basic. 2S was for really good stuff. This is just a 2. And so that was basically how tapes worked. And then then maybe you'd have XL1s, and then if people really went out, they would get like a Radio Shack tape, which, man, I have a lot of albums on Radio Shack tapes, and those tapes just completely dissolved. But Skye, surely there was a way to listen to CDs in cars. There was, but you had to have an adapter that you plugged into your tape player, and then even then, you had to have a little Discman. And if you had a little Discman, that Discman might skip, because Discmans were very, very touchy. You really wanted a Walkman for tapes. So, I would mainly just have tapes for that. I would have them for mixes. I made a whole video about a mix that I found from that period of time, all about the socioeconomic concepts of mixes. I talk a fair amount about, I used to trade Grateful Dead tapes through the mail with strangers. It was a thing I used to do. See, this show got an XL2S right here. It's February 13th, 1970. It's Fillmore. If you know, you know kind of show. And Dark Star ends. Where's Dark Star? That's right. Dark Star is the first track on side A. Amazing tape. And that was generally how that worked. But CDs were the priority. Absolute priority. That was your sense of ownership. That was the sense that you were building something. And listen, I'm going to sound super romantic and all that, but it did have meaning that you had to own something and that you would build it into your CD library and that your CD library reflected you. And I know we have playlists and we have Spotify end of year stuff, but all that can just be wiped. You don't own any of that. All that can be disappeared. This was like a thing where you'd go into a friend's room, and this would happen in college, this would happen in high school. You go into someone's room, you kind of see their their CD collection, you just kind of go, pretty meat and potatoes, or you go, oh my God, what is this? Once in college, I met this girl who had like the craziest Nick Cave collection. And I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's not like I married her. I did. But CDs were the priority. And the main way that you did this, the main way you got CDs were from record stores, borrowing from friends, and mail-away services. So let's break those down. Let's start with the CD store, because that's the thing I'm most nostalgic for. So I grew up outside of Boston, which meant I was very lucky at that time. I now live in Rochester, New York, which means I'm very lucky right now. In Rochester, New York, there are, within a 15-minute drive of my house, 3 separate new and used CD and record stores in spitting distance. Okay, we got the Record Archive, we got the Bop Shop, and we got the Needle Drop. Am I trying to get sponsored by the Needle Drop because I think it'd be funny? You're damn right I am. Okay, so I'm really lucky because up here in Rochester, it's kind of a post-industrial hellscape and not everything has been gentrified. So you can still have record stores, you can still have music stores. Okay, so what I want to do is sort of put you in like a real good day. Let's pretend it's after Christmas. Okay, let's pretend, whatever, got some money from family members, whatever it is. Let's pretend I have, $50 in my pocket. And let's pretend I go to Harvard Square, and I'll tell you like what that would have been like for me. And I'm going to get nostalgic because it's a thing that I used to do, right? So first of all, Harvard Square. So that was like the place. I didn't know what Harvard was. Like, I didn't know Harvard was a good university. I just knew it was the place where all the CD stores were, which is pretty funny now that I think about it. And it was also, there used to be a place right outside of the T station, which is what they called the subway there, where all the punks would hang out and like ask for money. It was called the Pit. And I never hung out in the Pit, but my gym teacher saw me one time in Harvard Square, and from that moment on, he called me Harvard. Harvard. So that was my nickname in high school from my gym teacher. Anyway, so I take the 75 bus, or I take the red line from Alewife, and once you would kind of debark right there, like a circuit would present itself in my head. As a music lover, I had a whole circuit of where I could go and where I'd go first and how I could prioritize what I could do with $50, what I could do with $30, what I could do with $10, okay? So the top priority was the used CD stores, and that was the main thing. That was the absolute coolest part about everything, was we are in a situation, right? Obviously now you get every single album that has ever been released for free or for 10 to 15 bucks a month, okay? So this is going to seem extravagant, right? But this is basically how it broke down. New CDs generally cost $15. $15 to $20, okay? I'm not going to do the inflation stuff because it doesn't make sense to me. When I do the inflation stuff, it doesn't actually match the way that it felt back then. Like, it didn't feel like 3 hours of work at Blockbuster was one CD. I guess it probably was, but who knows? Time moves differently when you don't have kids, I guess. So a new CD would cost about 15 bucks, sometimes as high as 20. And then used CDs cost 8. That was the basic price point for a used CD throughout most of the time when I was buying used CDs. So that meant, you got 50 bucks. Yeah, you can buy 4 CDs. You could buy 5 CDs. That's pretty awesome. Maybe if you want a tape, if you're getting a little cheap on a tape, a new tape would cost between like 10 and 12, and a used one would cost like $4. Now, sometimes there were exceptions, and this is funny because, what I tried to do, was I would try to build my collection of artists, So like the Beatles were sons of bitches because their stuff was always more expensive because they always knew it could sell. So a used Beatles CD was always 10 bucks as opposed to 8 bucks, And if you're trying to get Led Zeppelin, it might be 10 bucks as opposed to 8 bucks, It was this kind of like delicate thing where you had to figure out like what was worth it, how are you going to prioritize it. That's probably why so much of my collection is classic rock, even though I listen to a lot of alternative, because a lot of the alternative I listen to would be copied from other people because you had to buy it new, and we tried to buy music less new, right? We just kind of bootleg it, right? A rare exception, and this is a really fun thing I've never heard anyone talk about, but there would be like cutout bins where there's like certain CDs you always knew you could get cheaper. Like Bob Dylan's catalog. I'm trying to see here. Here's my Dylan catalog. Let me see if I have one of the albums I bought like that. Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely knocked out loaded. Basically any Bob Dylan album was like 10 bucks as opposed to 15 brand new. So most of the Dylan stuff I bought was new. It had something to do with Columbia Records. I don't know what it was. So I'll take you through my little circuit. All right. We're going to start off at my favorite chain called Mystery Train. And what was great about Mystery Train was it was right next to a really famous hamburger place called Bartlett's. So if you ever go to Harvard Square, you should eat a burger there. It's good. It's a super good burger. Don't get the macho burger. It's too much meat, y'all. You don't need to perform. Just calm down. And one of the cool things about Mystery Train, so I'll be talking about Harvard Square, but a lot of these stores had the same stores in Boston as well. So a lot of my memories are from Boston and from Cambridge because back in those days, if you had a successful used CD store, you could franchise. Not franchise, but you can open up multiple locations. But one of the cool things that Mystery Train had was bootleg tapes. So I bought a fair number of these. Now look at this crap. They're using Fuji tapes. Don't come with me. Fuji tapes. Do you know how many more of these I would have bought if they hadn't cheaped out with the Fuji tapes? And they're just made on these paper. And this is the little mark with a little R. Crumb drawing there. if you want to see that. There's the cover, just a picture of Nirvana, and this is them playing in Cologne in 1989. I'd buy tapes like this, live tapes of Hendrix or Nirvana or whoever, Pixies, like whatever it was. They had all sorts of bootleg tapes. And really, this is some of the cool stuff. If I was smart, this is all I would have bought. But, I was trying to put together a collection. There's another oh, yes. And now that Mystery Train location is an iPhone repair store. I'm not saying it was better back then. I am saying there were cooler stores back then. That much I can say. It may be better now that we don't have to buy music the same way, but iPhone repair. And then there was In Your Ear, another great place just like that, very similar, kind of dingy. It's now turned into luxury lofts. That would be my second stop. And again, so I'm going there, and if I find a CD I want, I put down the $8. If I don't, I kind of keep moving. There are Second Coming Records, a great place right there on Harvard Square, right next to the place, like all the places that you see in the movie Good Will Hunting, they're all gone. Everything's gone. Harvard Square's gone. It's all a bank. It's all just a nightmare. That's now the Boston Burger Company. The only used record store still around in Harvard Square is the one that opened in 1993, so I always thought it was like the new place. It's called Planet Records. It was fine. I went there a couple years ago. I don't remember what I got. The funny thing is now, used CDs cost $5. So if you're smart out there and you're trying to have a good music collection, maybe save the money. Don't go for the vinyl. Go for the CDs. The sound quality is better on vinyl, but not that much better. And if you really want to have a good physical media collection, you could go out there and you could own 20 CDs for $100, which, that's a lot of music. So I've just described what it was like back then. And I've already described, if you wanted to go into Harvard Square at that time, there was 1, 2, 3, 4 used stores. Then there was Newbury Comics, which is still there. I would go there. They also sold clothes. It was a fun place to go. They'd have toys and fun things to play around with. It had kind of this cool punk rock energy. The cool thing was they would sell new CDs for like $11 if it was like a big CD. So, I don't know, if you're into like U2 or whatever, if you're into like U2 and you want to get their new album, you might be able to get that for $11. So that's pretty cool. This is also the place where I spent the most I ever spent on an album. I might need to pause the recording to see if I can find it. Yeah, this is the one right here. Bjork's Telegram. If it was possible to have a thirsty simp purchase back in 1996, that's what this was. I was just so hard up for anything by Bjork. This was like an import, and I paid $30 for it. $30. That's outrageous. It's like I could have bought 4 CDs for that. Anyway, so that was Newbury Comics. So they had some of that more import stuff, more of the kind of punk stuff. There was like this big mega store that came over from England called HMV, which was just really cool because it felt all funny, and it was like multiple floors, and it was super exciting to go to. It was like a Mega Mart feeling, but it had this sort of sheen of coolness. I remember when I bought Biz Marquis's first album going off on CD, and I was in line, and there was this like hip hop head, and he's like, "You like that stuff?" He started talking to me, and I was like, I don't know, I just like the Biz. And then of course there was Tower Records. The Tower Records was kind of, oh yes, the HMV is now it was an EMS, and now it's a bank. So there you go, bank, high-end apartments, iPhone stores. That's what we got going here. The Tower was kind of janky in Harvard Square. It was kind of weird. I knew someone who used to be a manager there. That was kind of cool. That's now a TIAA CREF office. The one on Newbury Street was great. And that was basically like the mega center for all music stores in Boston. Like that was the one you wanted to go to. It was in this beautiful spot on Newbury and Mass Ave, right across from Biscuit Head. And the thing about this store was it was just like multiple floors, and it was clean, and it was cool, and it was bright. And I have so many memories of going there. And that was the place you went if you wanted to get an album at midnight. So back in the day, when albums would come out on Tuesday like they're supposed to, thank you very much, Tyler, the Creator, when they came out on a Tuesday, you would go and you would get in line and you would wait for midnight. And sometimes if you were lucky, they would give you something when you bought the album, which is why I have one of my favorite pieces of music memorabilia, my OK Computer giveaway poster that they gave me when I bought OK Computer when it came out. I got one of these for Supreme Clientele as well, but I cannot find it. Those are some two pretty good albums to get the day they come out. But that was like a super exciting thing. I don't know if it was the record company that did it or how it was, but that was the excitement back then. And that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, that's the thing you can't really recreate. You can't recreate that feeling of excitement. You have a different feeling of excitement, when there's a new live stream or an artist is going along with you. And everything's great. I love everything now. I wouldn't change anything. Okay, I would have more used CD stores, but still, I wouldn't really change much, except that was a particular kind of excitement. The feeling of getting an album at midnight and just trying to process it and listening to it and looking at the liner notes and all that stuff. So that's just a little bit of where, in a fairly normal American city, you would get music. We're not even talking about the malls. I haven't mentioned one mall. Those would usually have a place called Strawberries. Sometimes I think Sam Goody. One of my favorite memories of Strawberries is I convinced my brother to buy Onyx, my favorite album of theirs, one of my favorite rap albums of all time, All We Got Is Us. He got so pissed at the opening sketch, which is a kind of a sketch about putting a G-U-N in your M-O-T-U-H and H-I-L-L-ing yourself, that he just rolled down the window and threw it out the window. It's a very gangster move. There's also, on top of all that, you had your specialty stores. So if you were really into hip-hop like I was, you could go to a place called Skippy White's, which was not in Harvard Square. It was kind of in this weird location. It was sort of a weird place to go to, kind of intimidating. Then later you could go to Biscuit Head. If you're into punk, if you're into heavy metal, there's a place called Tang Records, which, had all the great punk and heavy metal, So that's how you would buy CDs back in the day. You could also borrow CDs, which is great because I have a lot of CDs in my collection that I did not buy, and I have way more CDs than that I did buy and are no longer in my collection. It's kind of a thing that just sort of happened. Don't lend anything you're not able to lose. There's one other way to get music that's kind of weird, and you've probably heard people talk about it a little bit, but there was like clubs run by record companies where they would try to sell you something that was too good to be true. The most famous was called Columbia House, where at that point the commercial was 1 penny for 8 CDs. So that sounds great. You send in 1 penny plus shipping, so it was like $1.50, and you'd get 8 CDs. The problem was you had to agree to buy 6 more CDs at the price of $13 to $17. So it ended up being not that great of a deal. Those who knew there was another one, the BMG Club, where you'd get 4 free, buy 1 at a regular price, and then get 3 more for free. That was it. So you could only do it once per address. So I did that, and that's how I got the complete Elvis 50s. So there was an Elvis box set of all the music he recorded in the 50s, and that's how I got it. I got it basically for free. How you held on to music was a whole nother question, because they were rather big and clunky. Very few people just kept them in their cases all the time. You will often see me with, showing off my cases and the different styles that I have. I have like this. This is a thing called disc socks. I got this much later. The same woman who I eventually married, eventually divorced, and was super into Nick Cave, convinced me to switch to this system. It's not a bad system. Back in the day, there was a thing called Case Logic. This is the closest I have to that. This is my Easy-E CD, and you see how it's torn off. They had a little way that you could take a CD and tear off the spine and put it in these little thin slip cases. That's usually what people did. Or they had books, these just terrible books where you could put all the CDs in, and like they'd get lost and scratched and thrown up all over the place. So that's like how you bought it. But then how did you know what to buy? Like, what would give you the faith to spend 2 hours of work, 2 hours of work on a used CD, or 3 hours of work on a piece of new music? Well, the secret to my taste is I had 3 older brothers. So I would just ask them what to buy. In particular, my oldest brother, he was the one who told me what to buy in terms of classic rock. So I would say, Pink Floyd, what's good about Pink Floyd? He'd say, buy Animals. Okay. And I bought Animals. I'm like, yeah, that's really good. Do I need to buy anything else? You can buy The Wall if you want. And and that would be what he would do. And he would tell me the good Rolling Stones is between 1968 and 1975. Anything after is okay. Anything before is fine, but that's what you want. So I'd go to Mystery Train. I'd go to In Your Ear, and I would try to pick up those records, and I'd try to find them. You know, and then my other brother, who was really into hip hop and into rap, he would buy tapes and he'd listen to them, and I'd listen to them with him, and that's how I ended up with Eazy. That's how I ended up with Public Enemy. That's how I ended up with Terminator X's Valley of the Jeep Beats. You know, that was one way that you found music. The other way, obviously, MTV was a huge, huge way. It is very hard to overstate how important it was. So, like, you know how boomers have that thing where they talk about, oh, I remember seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. So that was a singular moment, right? And that was great. And I'm sure that was an amazing moment. And I'm sure it was super transformative. For my generation, when we saw Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time on MTV. So, like, it was at different times, right? It was different times that we saw it. The showing that I saw was a different showing than what someone else saw. But I remember seeing it and just like that feeling that the boomers must have felt with the Beatles. Just like, okay, this is what we're doing now. Same thing happened with Radiohead and the song Creep. I'm like, this is what we're doing now. Same thing happened with the video for Slam by Onyx. Beavis and Butthead was a very important TV show that satirized sitting around and watching MTV too much, but they satirized what I actually did. Beavis and Butthead was what I did in high school. That I would sit on the couch with my friends, eating snacks, making fun of videos, and saying things are good or saying that they're bad. That literally was our life. And every once in a while, they would play something, and that would be so good that you'd end up buying a White Zombie CD. Check me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure White Zombie would not be popular without Beavis and Butthead. The thing that MTV did that was particularly important was they had specific shows for specific genres. So Headbangers Ball was for people who really liked heavy metal, 120 Minutes was for the alternative kids, and Yo MTV Raps was for people who liked rap music. And like, you just saw a lot of really great music. So that was the most consistent way that I would find new music. Even though it was corporate and all that stuff, that was the way that I did it. There's also the radio, and the radio is a whole complicated thing because, you know, like when I talk about like the algorithm and being formatted and all this stuff, it's been going on forever. It's just, you know, you have your Pinterest mood boards that describe who you are. Whereas in high school, you could just say, what is your main radio station? And you could just fill in the blanks. So like there was the same way there's a hierarchy of record stores that I would go to. Always go to Mystery Train first. Always go to Tower last because, you know, the Tower kind of sucked in Harvard Square, you know? So you'd have that same thing with the radio stations. And like they all meant something. Like it meant something. Like WBCN 104.1 was the most important radio station in Boston. It's now like a country station, I don't know. But like that was the perfect mixture of classic rock and alternative because you had 100.7 ZLX. And this is all from memory, by the way, so it's possible I get these numbers wrong, but I'm pretty sure I don't. 100.7 was ZLX. That was all classic rock. 101.7 WFNX was all alternative. So if someone said, or if they had a bumper sticker for WFNX, you knew that meant that they were into alternative music, right? So BCN was the mix between them. Then you had the rap and R&B station Jammin' 94.5, which is, you know, like I love Big Punisher, and I only love Big Punisher because that song was played all the time on Jammin' 94.5. And then you had Kiss 108. Just a little note here, Kiss 108 is actually at 107.9. But the reason they called it 108 is because back in the old days, the dials were so imprecise that if they said 107.9, you might stop at 107 when it's that close to 109. So all of these ways, all of these different places or where you could hear a single, where you could hear a song. When you want to get deeper, that's when you get to the college radio stations. That's where you get to 90.3. The one for Boston College or maybe that's NPR. 90.3 or 90.9. Like, the Boston College radio station was just stupid. It was just so good. It had all the best alternative music all the time. WERS for Emerson radio station had all the best underground music all the time. Plus, they had some of the best like rap shows, and that's the thing. Like, you wanted to hear underground rap. Like, where am I going to hear underground rap? How am I gonna get hip to this stuff at all? Well, you have to find like the random radio station on the random night, and then you're going to hear the song, and you're going to say, "Oh my God, that's the best." I remember once I was listening to some college radio station, and I didn't know what the song was, and thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard. And what I heard was Al Beanie. So I went to HMV in Harvard Square, and I went to the world music section because it was a world music show, and I just said, "Al Beanie," and the guy was like, "I don't know." Al Beanie. It's like diddle-diddle, diddle-diddle. Al Beanie. Was like a guitar? Yeah, the guitar was like diddle-diddle, diddle-diddle. And he was like, "Was it Ali Farka Touré?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then he gave me the Ali Farka Touré, and that was it. That was the actual album. Isn't that amazing? I walked up. Anyways, I should also say that like it was possible to preview some albums sometimes. So at many used record stores, they would have a CD player that you could do a test listen, because it's a big deal, like this copy of Eazy-E, that's pretty clean, but there's a real chance that something would be all scratched up and you're not returning them, so you get to listen to them, and usually the headphones would be like all broken and like sweaty, like one ear wouldn't work, but that would be one way you could listen. Some record stores would also have like listening stations where they would have like 10 albums that you could listen to, and usually there's at least one or two that you wanted to listen to. So that was another way you could potentially hedge on the gamble of buying this music that was so goddamn expensive. And then, of course, there's the magazines. That's the other way. Now, the magazine I read the most was Entertainment Weekly. I thought very solid reviews of music. Sometimes I would read Rolling Stone if a friend of mine had it, if I was at a doctor's office, or if my brother bought it. Rolling Stone was a bit of everything. Spin magazine was more indie-focused. Vibe, which I have their History of Hip-Hop, pretty good book there. Vibe was a good magazine, but it was a little too much R&B for my taste, so I would only buy it if it had a rapper on the cover. And then, of course, The Source, which came from Boston. Actually, the people who started The Source started on an underground radio station, underground radio show in Boston, because they were from Harvard, right? Harvard, right? And The Source was just great. The Source took super seriously. That was maybe the only magazine where if they gave you a recommendation, you would just buy it. I think it must have been The Locks or something, where it's just like, all right, well, they say it's this good, I think I should just get it. So that's how I found music, how much it cost, why I bought it, how I previewed it, how I protected myself. I did want to talk a little bit about concerts, just the sort of idea of what it was like to buy tickets. So mainly it was by the phone, and at that point it was already Ticketmaster. It was already hell on earth. But there was a feeling that you could, like, it didn't feel impossible. So, I'd get on the phone and I would call and you'd wait online. But there was like the coolest hack ever, which was some towns had department stores. Think of like Nordstrom, okay? Or Sears. In my case, it was a place called Filene's. And for whatever the hell reason, if you went to customer service at Filene's at 10 a.m. when concert tickets went on sale at 10 a.m. on Friday, you could just walk, you just walk through the slacks and through the perfume aisle where my brother used to say, "Hey, Skye, look at this," and then he'd hit me with like 50 shots of Chanel, so I stank like hell. Like you just walk right to the back, and I used to just get tickets there. I remember, Grateful Dead tickets used to be super hard to get. I'd be like, "Yeah, I'd like a ticket for Grateful Dead, please, on Friday. Thank you very much." And just get it. Now, there's also the question of scalpers. So there were scalpers. And the first time I ever met the devil, and he ever tempted me, was when I went to this little scalper outfit, this ticket dealer in Alewife. So Alewife is this interesting world of rotaries, of roundabouts. And it's funny because he was in the same office that Mitt Romney would go on to inhabit. So I went in there and I bought tickets from him twice. I think I bought tickets to see Sting. And I wasn't even a Sting fan, but I had a friend who told me that the live band that was playing with Sting was super good. And it was. It was famously good. It was a good show. And then there was this show. If you can't see that, that's the Smashing Pumpkins, okay, at the Avalon. Now, at some time, I'll tell you the story about the first time I saw the Smashing Pumpkins in 1991. But this was to see the Smashing Pumpkins in 1993, right after Siamese Dream had come out. Today was their biggest hit ever, and the Avalon was a really small club, okay, near Fenway Park. And you'll see the ticket price was $15. So if you can imagine seeing one of the best bands of the 90s, they're not one of my favorite bands, but like, the Smashing Pumpkins in the 90s, like, they were so good. They were just so good. It was so exciting seeing them, you know? I haven't seen the new Nosferatu movie yet, by the way. Don't spoil it. But, like, I was so excited that I went to the scalper. And I think I paid $60 for this ticket. So that's a lot over asking. And then Billy Corgan had a sore throat, and the show was canceled. So this is all I have. Look at that. Got your Jammin' 94.5 commercial on the other side. That's why it's not torn. So I think I maybe saw them at Lollapalooza the next year. But that was that. I could have seen a great show. But Billy, and matter of fact, I went on setlist.fm where they have the set list of all the shows that I ever played. And they have it as that concert happening. Nope, that concert did not happen. So, you know, how did I listen to all this music? That's the thing, you know, like most kids that I knew had a CD player either in their room or they had a CD Walkman, and that required batteries. You had to keep listening to it, or maybe a tape Walkman. I was kind of a rebel in high school, and I always walked around in the hallway with my Walkman, even though I wasn't supposed to. And sometimes Mr. Schlesinger would walk up and take it away from me. Mr. Schlesinger, very famous guy. You know, the assistant principal, assistant principals always have to be sons of bitches so that the principals can seem like nice guys. I'm still friends I'm Facebook friends with my high school principal, despite the fact I was a cad back then. But anyways, Mr. Schlesinger would take away my headphones. First, you was eating the crackers in the hallway when I asked you not to eat the crackers. Then you was playing with the beanbag when I told you not to play with the beanbag. Now I see you got a tape player. That was Mr. Schlesinger used to get mad at us for playing hacky sack. He called it the beanbag. Anyways, so is it better now? I don't know. It's democratized. Musicians make less money. The music feels less special, but we have more access to it. If you could have asked me when I was 17 years old, Skye, would you like access to every single piece of music ever made for $15 a month? I would have said yes so fast that if you'd said per day, I probably would have tried to figure out how to make it work. So I don't know. But that was the old days. I want to give a shout out to David S. Kernick. I found an essay of his that he wrote for the Crimson, which is like the Harvard newspaper, from 1992, where he describes the location of all the places I used to go. That helped me to like look up their current locations and what they turned into. He's now an English professor at Rutgers, so maybe he should have his own YouTube channel. I emailed him about it. He's like, I don't remember writing that essay very well. But anyways, thanks for helping to solidify my memories on all that. So was this a fun idea? Was this a neat thing? A little joy? How even long was this video? Am I recording? Yeah, okay. 45 minutes, that's great. That's one side of a tape. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed it. If not, that's cool. Maybe I'll do my AI video. It's all kind of connected. Oh yeah, did you want to see the dogs and stuff? I'll show you the dogs. Oh yeah, there's the CD collection, by the way. That's I got the Clash, Cheech and Chong, you know. Oh my God, I have I have Commons B? When did I get this? I just did a video about Common. I said I didn't have this album. Jesus Christ, Skye, way to go. You know, I got your Dylan there. You know. You got Jay-Z, American Gangster, Kid Rock. I'll talk about Kid Rock someday. Yeah, someday I'm going to do a video about a good Kid Rock song. Yeah, it exists. All my Morrissey. Yeah, then you get down there. You know, you got your XYZ. You got your White Zombie. You know, the White Zombie that I only bought because of Beavis and Butthead. All right, I'm making enough of a mess. There's the dogs. There's Toby. There's Bo. He's snoring. He's not interested in this stuff. It's like enough about the 90s, old man. No shit, right? And should I continue doing this series? I'm interested because I have a friend who was in the Army, and he's trying to describe the way that music was shared during Operation Kill Iraqis. I don't know what we call that. Enduring Freedom. And you know, the way that music was shared in Yugoslavia when my wife was in high school, you know, it's all very interesting stuff. Like, how do we consume music? It keeps changing. It's always interesting, depending on where you are and what your life experience is. So, tell me if you want to see more in the series. All right, I got to stop talking. Okay, which one of these three things is the camera? Is it that?